From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. We have a fun show for you. We're breaking down OTAs. We're out there practice today, and to help us do that, Matt Boyer in studio. What's up, Matt?
Gentlemen, good to be finally in the same room with you both.
Dude, it was good to see you. It was good to see a lot of our media brethren out there, and honestly, just good to feel football kind of getting closer. I know we're all very excited for training camp, and honestly, I'll say I might have in the past taken practices for granted a little bit. Being out there today, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, being out there maskless, which was fantastic. You know, seeing the players out on the field, and I know the headlines were about the quarterbacks, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But I thought the attendance, just the fact that there were so many veterans on the field, I think the sense of urgency is there for this Broncos team, and that's exciting to see.
Yeah, 9 total players that missed today. But some of them were listed as missing, but were actually there. For instance, Baron Browning was here. He was on a card out there, but he wasn't actually participating. You talked about Melvin Gordon. He's got his own routine. Shelby Harris had the skin issue. Bradley Chubb's getting the foot cleanup. So everybody that was, air quotes, missing had a viable reason to miss in terms of that. And, I think it was, like I said, a very high attendance. You got a bunch of guys that saw the 5-win team last year. They want to come out and get the max number of reps in. And I think it showcases a commitment to improving on last year's debacle.
But you also got the sense, and we heard this in the press conferences, you also got the sense from the players that when you didn't have it last year, especially the quarterbacks, how much they missed it for their performance in the following year.
Yeah, and the coaches recognize that too, right? I had a chance to talk to Vic Fangio earlier this offseason, and he said the most important thing that these players are going to have this year is that tape of last year, being in that same offensive system, especially the young offensive guys like Jerry Jeudy, Drew Lock, even Garrett Bowles was talking about the fact that, Mike Munchak, doesn't really need to say a ton to him to get him back going in the right position. So the fact that these guys have had months now to watch this film and finally put it into practice out on the field, I think is going to set them up for much more success than they were able to get last year at the same time.
So we mostly saw some 7-on-7, a lot of individual drill kind of stuff. There was certainly some rust out there, receivers having some drops, and some of the quarterbacks, especially Teddy Bridgewater, seemed like he's still getting on the same page. But what are some things that you noticed out there, level intensity, that kind of thing?
I thought, for me, just my eyes immediately went to number 5, right? So I thought Bridgewater, this is the first time I got to see him in person throw. I watched him a couple of games, or I watched a couple of his games this past year. His ability to get it out quick is not common in the NFL. I thought his read and react is much quicker than I might have expected it to be on tape. Now, you go back and look at that Kansas City game, and he was getting it out very quick. His decision-making is very decisive. And I thought that that's maybe something that Drew Lock looks at and thinks, oh, you know what? Maybe I can add this to my game. Drew talked about the fact that Teddy was a great teammate. First time he got to meet him in person this week, of course. But I think there's a lot of things that are going to happen in that quarterback room that we haven't seen in years past.
Yeah, I think Teddy Bridgewater kind of brings that Alex Smith mindset, as it were. Get it out quick, get rid of the ball quick, no negative plays. I'd rather take the short 3-yard plus than the sack or risk the sack, any of that kind of stuff. And that's what you get. You have two diametrically opposite skill sets almost. Drew does hold on to the ball a little bit. He does work to try to find somebody a little bit deeper and does have the stronger arm. So I think the marriage of the two players could bring out the best in both of them when all's said and done.
And that's something we want Drew Lock to learn more about. We saw a little bit as the season wore on. The first half of games, maybe even the first 10 games of the season, he had over 10 yards average depth of target. But then in the final games, he had a little over 8. So it was something that we saw Drew Lock start to look at a little bit more of the underneath stuff. But again, Teddy Bridgewater has made a career, much like Alex Smith, made a career out of finding those quick receivers and getting whatever positivity that he could get. If a defense is giving you 3 yards, sometimes that's what you got to take. If nothing else, give yourself into second to medium, maybe even third and short.
Yeah, and you go back and you watch those Carolina Panther games. Teddy Bridgewater didn't have the weapons that Drew Lock did last year, and he kept them in games. I mean, yeah, they lost to the Raiders and they lost to the Chiefs just like the Broncos did, and they lost to the Broncos by 5. But I thought that the way he was able to keep them in games and the way that he was able to navigate that offense demonstrated to me that he can have success in Pat Shurmur's scheme if he does beat out Drew Lock. And I know that's going to take a lot. I know Ben doesn't like I know, Ben, you're a big fan of the fact that Drew can zing it a little bit more than Teddy can, but I think that if he's given the opportunity, Teddy Bridgewater can have a lot of success in this offense.
He can. I think this, like we talked about before, this comes down to who makes the completions and who doesn't turn it over in the end. And right now, that seesaw kind of would favor Teddy based on their career pasts. So Drew is really going to have to improve and clean that up in order to hang on to the job.
One of the things that was really fun out there for me is seeing Von Miller running around out there. And it's amazing, as long as I've covered this team, there's just an energy he brings out there. The rest of the defensive players respond to him. We were even hearing from Melvin Gordon last week because he was talking about just how much that impacted him. Like the offensive side of the ball, when Von Miller went down, there was a collective like, oh man, this hurts. This is big for us. I just saw the rest of his teammates really responding to him. And again, reminding me of how in training camp, that was exactly how he's just kind of one of those guys. He's a pulse guy.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was thinking about the exact same thing when the Broncos were deciding about picking up his option. We focused so much on the money and the production, and we didn't really focus a lot on the off-the-field stuff that he brings. Teddy Bridgewater in his press conference mentioned the fact that Von Miller was one of the first people to call him, and Von takes a lot of pride in the fact that he is the Broncos welcoming committee anytime Denver gets a new player. So, there's a lot of off-field things. There's a lot of things that Vaughn does when the team comes on the field at the beginning of games. They all wait for Vaughn to come out of the tunnel. He's the last one out all the time, and he breaks down the team. And I think there's a lot of things from a respect point of view that Vaughn generates in that locker room and is able to do from a leadership side that maybe a replacement guy wouldn't be able to do if they were going to replace him down the line. I think Von Miller being a Bronco for life, the fact that that's important to him, I think is going to be important to this team.
Still, though, Ben, it feels like we need to consider the fact that a torch kind of needs to be passed. Because if remember, we talked about that Melvin Gordon quote and how he said the entire team, offense and defense, really hit a big wall when they lost Vaughn. That torch kind of needs to be passed a little bit because maybe it is Justin Simmons that has to be that for the team.
Well, and I think Justin now has the cachet to do that. Anytime it's difficult to do that when you're not the high dollar guy on a team, and now that Justin is one of those guys, I think it kind of gives you a cachet. The team has rewarded me and placed faith in me with this amount of dollars. Now I am expected to take on this much leadership as well. And I think that there is. I don't know if there's necessarily a passing of the torch, but the relay baton is certainly being outstretched at this point.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you joining us in the studio. When we come back, we'll get more specific on the quarterbacks and what we saw out there in the practice field. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Thank you again to Matt Boyer for joining us in the previous segment. Let's continue talking about some of the observations we had out at practice. Ben, one of the things that you pointed out that I think is a really important thing to notice about the quarterbacks is just the difference in velocity. Sometimes we talk about the different spin that quarterbacks have, and I know we harken back a little bit to Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler and how significantly different the anticipation had to be for the receivers, but we did notice it a little bit out there in the practice field.
Yeah, you can see a definite velocity difference when Drew Lock's throwing the football versus Teddy Bridgewater or Brett Rippon. He has a stronger arm. I mean, that's just, it just is what it is. I don't know that that that's necessarily going to be a detriment in any way. It's in throwing the ball too hard for receivers to catch.
Right.
But it comes out quicker. It does, and it has more pop when it hits receivers' hands. You can just hear it. You can see it. And that said, that wasn't something that we expected. We didn't expect Teddy Bridgewater to come out here and Brett Favre it up. But I think that if you're a Broncos fan, you kind of got to like what we saw today. I mean, granted, 7-on-7s at the beginning of Phase 3 in OTAs, but Drew Lock was accurate, on point, and throwing the ball with velocity that Teddy Bridgewater didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, this is his first day out there, right? I mean,
yeah, it's way too early to make judgments like that.
Yeah.
But there was a definite comparison day one. Now, you would expect Drew to be a little bit more versed in the playbook and have better timing with these receivers. Simply by virtue of having played with them for over a year and then been out here the last couple of weeks. But, it was encouraging to see. And that's what I'm choosing to take out of that so far.
Well, right. And so, but I wonder from a receiver standpoint, if you have to change a little bit of your mindset with each quarterback. And I know it was a little bit like that with Manning versus Osweiler. But Manning, of course, was such a technician in at least the perspective of he knew where he wanted to put the ball. as time wore on and his arm strength, which was never elite, by the way, got to a certain point, the receivers had to, I guess, acclimate to that. Brock Osweiler was throwing it harder. And Brock Osweiler, of course, always had the nose down. He, for whatever reason, from his arm angle, decided to have, that was just part of it.
Well, when you're that tall, and you're coming from a high reach like that, a lot of times you are throwing the ball down, and that did hinder Osweiler a little bit in terms of, what he was able to do. But yeah, you did see a velocity difference. Sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes it's not relevant. Like you said, with Brock, he definitely had more velocity than Manning, but Peyton Manning was still Peyton Manning.
But the timing and the placement of it is really fascinating. And Teddy Bridgewater has found a way over the course of his career to work within what he perceives as his strengths and what everybody perceives as his strengths. So it's not like, I think you said it perfect. It's not like it's a detriment. This isn't a negative necessarily or a positive of not Lock, that sort of thing. I think this more has to do with just how they develop chemistry out there with their receivers. When it's Cortland Sutton, for example, and he's catching passes from Drew Lock, well, he knows it's going to be coming in faster. He has a little bit more of an understanding of where the ball is going to be. With Teddy Bridgewater, maybe there has to be a little bit of anticipation. He has to maybe come back to it just a hair. Again, these are small things, but when you're trying to figure out what your offense is going to be and how you guys are going to execute, these are some of those small things that make the difference on who ultimately gives this team the best chance to win.
Right. It's about completing passes. Yeah. Honestly, it's about completing passes and not turning the football over. End of the day, that's where you're at. And, you saw when we were out there today, you saw guys out there completing passes. Now, there's no pass rush, again, 7-on-7, but you saw guys completing passes for the most part. Teddy Bridgewater was a little off, overthrew some guys, underthrew some guys. He was a little off. But part of that's, like I said, getting the timing down with these guys. So, this is going to be an interesting battle that Vic Fangio has said will wage on into camp and into preseason games.
Yeah, and Vic Fangio acknowledged that they aren't going to have 11-11s during at least the early portions of OTAs. Maybe we see a little bit of something towards mandatory minicamp. But, Vic Fangio acknowledges, whatever distance they can put between each other isn't going to be significant during this time. And so, I guess that at least can calm down some of the fan base or calm down the media members out there that are going day by day wondering who is ahead of who. Drew Lock was getting the first reps out, but that doesn't necessarily mean a lot right now. What means something is when they get to the training camp in preseason and how they perform on a day-in and day-out basis.
Right. And it doesn't mean anything, but then it also does. Drew Lock is QB1 right now. He is. And whether or not there's going to be a quarterback competition, which the coaches have stated there will be, but for right now, Drew Lock is QB1, and it's his job to lose or Teddy's job to take, and that's how you have to frame this quarterback competition going into it, because those are the facts. That's how it's actually shaped out. People that are telling you that Teddy's already ahead or whatever, that's just nonsense. The guy who has been here, has the timing with these receivers, and has been in the playbook does. Now, Teddy Bridgewater's there to push him and maybe even take the job if he can do it. But as it sits right now, Drew Lock is probably going to get the first snap on when training camp starts.
But as we mentioned, it sort of makes sense anyways, because the fact is he's been here this whole time. He is the incumbent, and he does sort of have to be unseated. Even if you say it's a 50-50 deal and it's going to be an open competition, the chemistry with the receivers, the understanding of the offense, working within this scheme, all of those are the inside track. The fact is, and we've said this for a while on the show, the fact is if Drew Lock loses the camp battle, it will say something about Teddy Bridgewater because he is a vet and he brings a certain level of consistency, but it says a lot about Drew Lock, who already, I wouldn't say has the deck stacked in his favor, but he does have the inside track.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's the important thing to note, is that if you look at and we've talked about Teddy Bridgewater being the veteran and knowing what it takes because he's a veteran, but also Drew Lock has the familiarity. His familiarity with the offense, his familiarity with his teammates, and knows not just their physical capabilities, but also what they need mentally, in terms of a teammate. So I think that Drew Lock does have the edge here. And I think that it's his job to lose and Teddy Bridgewater's job to take.
Of course, we'll continue to watch it. We'll be out here all off season. When we come back, some observations on practice, including some of the press conference comments from the quarterbacks. We'll get to that next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Let's talk about some of the press conference quotes we got. And I just want to do a general overlook of some of this right now because I thought that Drew Lock stood out almost immediately. Just super intense, super focused. He had kind of that one funny moment where he was asked about Aaron Rodgers and he just basically went right into practice. Had other moments talking about, hey, well, if one day I'll go back and read some of the comments that people got wrong. And I thought overall, I just didn't know what to expect from Drew Lock, but that's what I kept thinking. Like, this guy feels really intense, and people kept saying they really liked his focus.
I was going to say, there was an edge or an intensity to him that we haven't seen before. Most of the time we've seen Drew Lock, it's been kind of that goofy, relaxed, banter kind of thing from him.
It was not that.
It was not that today. It was business. It was business time, as Flight of the Conchords would say. And I felt like this new kind of sort of edgy Drew Lock thing. I don't know. I mean, we'll see if it translates on the field, but it certainly, felt exciting to me to kind of see it. Definitely a little bit of bristle, to him. Definitely a little bit of, even though I'm telling you I haven't seen the negativity, I know it's out there kind of thing. And he should know it's out there based on his play. He said his dad, is a listener of the show and texted him some of the Cortland Sutton comments and everything when Cortland was on the show and the positive stuff. And he's trying to tune a lot of that negativity out. But, it's impossible for that stuff not to seep through a little bit, and I think that it definitely has molded his perspective. I think that, he said that he wants to make this team great. He wants to make this city great. It's a great football town. He wants to restore that. He wants to be a part of that. And a competitor wants that. Competitors should have that attitude. And so I like seeing that out of him from that regard. I like seeing the intensity, the joking about, I'm going to read all those stuff people were wrong about. That was funny. There are people that, the people that hate him are going to take that the wrong way. Oh, he reads the comments or whatever. But reality was he was just kind of joking. He was just kind of having some fun with it. And I liked it. I thought it kind of, he felt like he made the leap into adulthood almost.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And honestly, I get that sense too, because we're beyond, and we said this like there's that 5-game stretch when he's rapping on the sideline, and we're like, okay, what's it going to look like though when things aren't going well? Like everything is going right. You went 4-1. The team easily took a massive turn towards the positive when you were on the field, and then you got the next year and people were talking about you regressed and you got hurt again. And all of a sudden the level of intensity like ratcheted up on him. And he even acknowledged like, I'm not having as much fun doing this. So we talked about finding that balance. So you said, he's intense. He came into this thing seeming very serious. I have to imagine that even if he hadn't directly seen the quotes from people, some of the same media members that had been saying those things were in this press conference. So maybe there's a little bit of that. Again, we say this all the time. The chip on the shoulder can go either way. It can be something that motivates you and makes you better, or it can be something that weighs you down. And we'll just ultimately see which one really affects Drew.
Yeah, I don't want him to lose that playfulness because there's an aura about him. And I talked about this before the Broncos ever drafted Drew Lock. You and I were out at the Senior Bowl. I wasn't working for this at the time, but we compared notes on this. And I told you, I sat down with Drew Lock. He made me want to put the pads on and play with him right there. He just has an energy about him that you want to jump in the huddle with the guy. And that's why I think so many teammates are so effusive in their defense of Drew Lock, despite his subpar play, is that they want to play with the guy. They want him to succeed because he just has that energy about him. So I don't want him to lose that. This newfound intensity, I like it, but I don't want him to lose also that kind of loose, hey, guys, we got this. Let's go out and do, I don't want to see him lose that element that guys want to strap up and throw on the pads and play with him.
Meanwhile, Teddy Bridgewater and some of his comments, I thought they were good. I thought he was just kind of measured, even. It's everything we've ever heard from Teddy Bridgewater. So you have Drew, kind of the young guy with a little bit of fire in his belly, and it seemed like Teddy Bridgewater was more just taking it in stride. At least that was my perception.
Yeah, and Teddy's kind of an introvert. We know that a little bit. We talked with his backup last year. PJ Walker was on the show, came in, visited. Good. He's a student of Tim Jenkins, and we talked to PJ for a while, and PJ kind of talked about it. Teddy's kind of got that quiet confidence. He's a little more laid back. He's just kind of and there were some Carolina media members, I think, trying to bait him with those comments on Joe Brady or whatever. And
he
Teddy
wasn't having it.
Wasn't having it at all. Shut it down and acknowledged what they were trying to do and shut it down. It wasn't like Drew just kind of pivoted to what we had practice. He just ignored the question with the practice. Teddy, that's a veteran move right there, is acknowledging them and still shutting it down, having the confidence to do it. Like to see Drew get to that point with some of the questions as far as that kind of stuff goes.
And that's another thing he could learn from Teddy.
Yeah, you can learn some of these things from Teddy. You can learn how to be a leader from a guy who's been around a long time. Not that Drew necessarily, air quotes, needs to learn how to be a leader, but for me in my personal life, anytime I come into contact with somebody, I assume there's something to learn from that person, and I try to figure out what it is.
All right, I like that. And finally, Von Miller. Boy, I miss Von Miller press conferences. There's just a certain energy he brings to the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And he also had his opportunities to, he knows the media really well here in town, so he had a little bit of back and forth with them. But he sounds like a guy that is just as hungry as he was last year. Overall thing that I took away from that is just everybody kept asking him, are you going to be able to get back to what you were? You were coming into last year looking like you were in the best shape, and you were mentally motivated more than you'd ever been, and that type of thing. And Von said, look, that fire didn't really go away. And I'm really fascinated to see Von Miller because he, being away from the team, not being able to be with your guys. He came out here for some practices towards the end of the season, but being away certainly takes its toll, and we know that does that for some players. I think that he's going to be such a big influence on this locker room, and I think they missed him.
I think so too. It was great to have him back. It made it feel like football season again, having Von Miller out there and yucking it up with the media and all that kind of stuff. And I love how he put some non-family hour content in there too. It's I love it when players get raw and real for a second, and he kind of did that a little bit. So it was good to see Von open up, and it was good to see him kind of have the attitude that he does. I'm not counting down my time in Denver, any of that kind of stuff. I'm ready to go out and get to work, and that's the right attitude.
I completely agree. All right, thank you again to Matt Boyer for joining us earlier. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thank you for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.